Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. So today I wanted to introduce you all to my two new rabbits. Basically I came across an advert on Gumtree. I saw there were some rabbits quite nearby who were needing to be rehomed, and basically their story is they were handed into a vet's nearby, and then someone who works there actually had taken them on for a while and looked after them, but they wanted to find long-term good homes for them. So yeah, I saw a little post about them and went to go and collect them a few days after. The first thing I noticed about them is their very sassy and outgoing personalities. They're so comfortable around me, which is so nice to see. Seem totally comfortable in my company and very relaxed, and they're just very, very friendly. I have a spare enclosure, obviously, so, you know, a perfect neutral territory to bond a group of rabbits. So this was the plan, and I actually ended up deciding to bond them a lot sooner than I intended, just because of the fact that the two new girls were so settled. They were absolutely desperate to get out of that hutch. They obviously wanted to explore because it was quite small for them, and there was only certain days I could get them out on the grass because of the weather. So I just really wanted to get them out as soon as possible, and obviously, you know, give them that space that they really wanted. I was torn with the idea a bit. I was a bit worried that because my Piper and Bigwig were so close, I was kind of afraid that it might upset them and, you know, ruin their bond. So that's maybe why I'd always put off getting any more rabbits. But it kind of occurred to me that, you know, if something happened to one of them, and then one of them would be left on their own, and would probably really struggle, to be fair. And it's not easy to just, you know, get rabbits out of nowhere. It kind of takes a lot of planning and just having them available, really. So it just all seemed like the right thing to do. And the key thing is here having a neutral habitat, because if I was to just put them both straight in with Piper and Bigwig in their habitat, then that could lead to a lot of serious fighting, because they would get very defensive and territorial if two newcomers are introduced to their environment. So having a neutral space was crucial. So it had been just less than a week, and I decided to go ahead, just given the circumstances and the fact that the girls were so comfortable and, you know, chilled out already. I had to do some preparation though. So these two are actually, they are Angora cross lion lops. So yeah, there's certainly one of them which has a lot more kind of long fur around her face, and because this can kind of affect how other rabbits interpret the body language, so I thought before I get them bonded I need to give her a good trim, just so the other rabbits can read her body language better, and so that there's no miscommunication on that part. So that was her first little trim, just kind of trimmed around her face. And by the way, I should, before we go any further, tell you what I've decided to name them. So the white creamy one I've decided to name Enya, and the other bunny, the sort of beigey brown coloured one, mottled one, I've decided to name her Orla. So those are their names. So yeah, that was a bit of preparation I had to do before, and obviously, yeah, just kind of get them all a bit neater, really, and get their kind of fluff around the face trimmed. That was the main thing. So then what I did was I filled up the enclosure with plenty of sort of nesty bedding. I've got straw down at the minute. I decided to go with straw because I don't think at this moment in time they're going to be sharing the same hutch, so they need plenty of nesty spaces, and straw is quite a good substrate to use for the breed of rabbit which I have, just because normal bedding does stick to their fur really badly, but the straw kind of doesn't cling as bad. So I kept the enclosure very minimal. This is quite important when you're bonding rabbits. You don't want any kind of little hidey houses that only have one entrance. They can get cornered. So big open spaces, but also plenty of large sheltered areas. So we have the tables which are holding up the hutch, and the ramps, which seem like a good open space for them to shelter without them being able to get cornered. And obviously I just put around loads of hay piles so that there's a bit of a distraction, and yeah, they've got a few logs and things to climb on as well. So now for the exciting, terrifying part, to put them together. And again, quite a crucial thing here is making sure that they meet at the exact same time, because if one of the rabbits has time to familiarise himself with the surroundings, then they maybe don't hold back so much, and they may start to show some territorial behaviour. So I guess initially, to ensure that they meet in at the same time, so it's a neutral space for both rabbits, and neither is gonna be trying to defend its territory because it's a new space for them. So yeah, initially I guess they were just interested in the new surroundings. It's quite a lot of stimulation for them to be placed in a new environment, so initially they're going to be preoccupied with that, and obviously if there's food about, that's another distraction. So in the beginning things are quite calm. They seemed to just be more interested in the surroundings, really. So a short while into the introduction, there was a definite switch at one point where the behaviour kind of changed from calm to slightly more dominant and even aggressive behaviours. And this is all quite normal for rabbit introductions, because you got to remember they already have their established hierarchy, and the minute you add any more rabbits into that, that totally kind of shakes everything about, and it all becomes brand new, and they have to kind of start from the beginning really and work out that pecking order. So this is a process that they have to go through during the bonding, and it can be very scary to watch from an owner's point of view, because let's be honest, they're so precious and you want to protect them and you don't like to see them being frightened or getting, you know, chased about. So it can seem quite daunting, but it is very normal, and they just have to go through this whole process to kind of, like I say, establish a new pecking order and, you know, work out who's going to be at the top, who's the boss, and just figure out how those dynamics are going to fit together. So I actually decided to go with 2 females because my main fear was really with Bigwig being quite aggressive with another male rabbit. He is quite he's never really been aggressive, I wouldn't say, but he definitely has a tendency to be, I would say, if a male was put in his presence, then he would most likely be quite territorial, I think, and I was kind of leaning more towards the females because I felt like they would be better accepted into their group, if you like. So that's the reason I went with the females. Also the fact that that's what I had available to me. So yeah, but certainly my main fear was Bigwig and him becoming territorial with another male, whereas Piper is generally quite laid back and friendly, so I figured if anything 2 females would probably give the most successful outcome in this case. But generally I think equal numbers of male and female in a rabbit group, certainly in larger groups, tends to be favourable. I guess at the end of the day, it's really down to their individual personalities. It's very complex of how the group dynamics fit together, so personalities will play a big role in how they assert themselves with each other. So when the chasing started, things did seem to heat up a little bit. There was quite a lot of dominant behaviour, so what I noticed was lots of chasing, which again, very normal during this kind of experience. That is to be expected, really. So plenty of chasing. You will see the rabbit who is trying to be higher up in the hierarchy will be the one chasing, and then the more submissive one will be being chased. In this experience, I found that the ones being chased didn't try and attack back. They were being very submissive and kind of just running away from the rabbit they were being chased by. So the chasing did lead to some hair pulling as well, again quite normal, and not to be too alarmed by this. Obviously if it's getting more serious and progressing to stuff like, you know, injuries and bites which are drawing blood, then that is when it may be a good idea to intervene. But the thing is with rabbit bonding, you kind of have to let them go through this process, and the minute you separate them, it's kind of game over really, and you have to start the whole process over again. So it's really best to allow them to continue with this process unless things escalate and your rabbit is genuinely in a risky situation where they are likely to be injured or have been injured. So always keep a close eye, obviously, but just try not to get too involved unless you really have to. So I kept a towel nearby in case I needed to intervene. I also had some gloves in case I needed to take one of the rabbits out, and you know, it's good to have those just to avoid getting injured yourself. Some other behaviour which I noticed throughout this experience was quite a bit of mounting. This was our male mounting the new female or females. Again, very normal, that's him asserting his dominance, and they were quite submissive and just allowed him to do this. So again, nothing to be too alarmed by. It's a totally normal behaviour and to be expected during an introduction like this. So what I did notice was the new rabbits tended to retreat quite a bit throughout this experience. I noticed that after a few hours of the chasing, they would sort of go off to a corner and try and avoid them. Again, they are just trying to keep out of their way, they are being submissive, they're not fighting back, and they weren't trying to assert themselves really, they were just being submissive. I also noticed that they would bow down to either Piper or Bigwig, and this was to sort of show that they're being submissive and that they kind of accept their place in the structure of the group as being the more submissive one. So they kind of just want to be left alone really, and to allow the others to be higher up in the pecking order. So yeah, that is kind of a display of submissive behaviour. So they would often come over to each other and meet and have a little bit of a sniff, and then again maybe continue chasing or a bit of nipping. Like I say, no blood was drawn, but you have to kind of keep closely monitoring so it doesn't escalate, but it can look quite threatening on the face of it, but it tends to be a lot more, it tends to look like a lot more of a big deal than it really is, because generally it's a totally natural process that they're going through, and like I say, just best to let them get on with it and try not to feel too afraid. But yeah, it's just keeping a close eye just in case anything goes wrong really. So they are housed outdoors, so I figured I would pick a milder day to do this. It wasn't super warm, but I knew the overnight temperature was going to be similar to what it was during the day, which meant that if they weren't at the stage of being able to share a hutch, for example, to sleep in, then that would be okay because they weren't going to get too much of a chill overnight. So I kind of just had to make do with picking the mildest night I could, and also choosing a day where I had the whole day to keep a close eye on them, and that I wasn't needing to be out anywhere, that I could stay around all day and monitor the behaviour just so I could get involved if absolutely necessary. So the dominant behaviour and kind of chasing and nipping and stuff, that did seem to continue for a good few hours before it calmed down. It was probably maybe about 8 hours or so before they really got tired and started to kind of leave each other alone a lot more, and even show some positive signs of successful interaction, such as grooming one another and being able to eat closer to each other without feeling threatened. So all really positive, but again, it's quite a long process and it's not like an immediate bonding experience. This is something which takes time, especially in a group, because there's a lot more complexity in that, because you've got more personalities coming together and it can be a little bit more difficult. It's been a good few hours now, and to be fair, it's gone a lot better than I thought. I know on the face of it, it can seem quite intense, quite nerve-wracking, also exciting at the same time. It's kind of a whole lot of, I don't know, just it's very new, and I guess it is very exciting but also quite nerve-wracking because it obviously looks, like I say, quite intense, and it's quite scary when you're watching because it can seem like they're being quite aggressive, but they have to kind of do this to establish a hierarchy, and it's all very normal behaviour. You just have to kind of, it's that fine line between what's them establishing a pecking order and what is like, where does it cross the line. There's kind of like, you have to just kind of keep a close eye and make sure that they're not getting injured, and that, you know, there can be aggression, but there doesn't have to be like, you know, if they're drawing blood or seriously hurting each other, that's when you may need to intervene. But oh dear, I guess what I'm trying to do is take a bit of a step back and just let them get on with it. Bigwig keeps humping Orla. So Enya does seem to be a little bit more comfortable now. She was being a bit withdrawn earlier, but it's really good to see that she's a bit comfortable again now. She's calmed down, and they all seem to have calmed down a lot, to be honest. So obviously it's a lot for them all to take in. They've all been in their like established pairs, and like obviously Piper and Bigwig have been together for such a long time, so it's gonna take a bit of adjustment, and obviously, you know, it could be a good few weeks for things to settle down properly, but already they are a lot calmer than they were earlier, which is really good to see. So we'll just see how they get on over the next couple of days.